All right, everybody. I am here for another interview. This time, we've got FEqualsMA, a good friend of mine.
Hey, hey.
Thank
Hello,
you.
stream.
Thank you for agreeing to do this. I'm really excited. I wanna like put your brain under the microscope because there's so many things
Yeah.
about you that I find interesting and that are so different from me as a player. That I want to understand. I want to dive into the mind of FEqualsMA.
Sounds good.
Yeah, but I think we should definitely do, some sort of basic background stuff on you. I feel like, for most folks, it's worth kind of doing that to start. So, how did you first get into StarCraft? Just as kind of a starter.
Gosh. Well, the first time I played StarCraft was like Brood War,
Hmm.
back as a kid with friends, and it was the kind of thing where it was like, we didn't know what we were doing. We'd like start the game up, send the workers to go mine, and then go play outside, making like robot costumes out of cardboard or whatever, and then come
Right.
back in an hour later and be like, all right, I'm gonna max on like battle cruisers, and then the other person's like, oh, well, I'm gonna make Scourge to kill your battle cruisers, and then I'm gonna have Guardians and Devourers, right?
Right.
This is like fun thing. So I did that, didn't really play the game. I didn't know that there was a competitive scene until college. And then freshman year of undergrad, my RA was like, hey, have you ever heard of this? You play video games. You heard of this game called StarCraft? I'm like, yeah, I used to play StarCraft. He's like, great, you're on the team. You're on the starting lineup. I'm like, wait, what? For what? So yeah, it was CSL. That actually, my freshman year, it was still Brood War because StarCraft 2 hadn't come out yet. And I believe the prize for winning CSL that year was beta keys to StarCraft 2.
Wow.
We did not win, but I still managed to somehow get into the beta at some point, and then yeah, just played in college, and then have been playing on and off until today.
Wow. Yeah. Very cool. And so you've kind of had a long sort of history in your life with video games in general. Then it sounds like if your friends are like, oh yeah, you're a gamer, like.
Yeah.
What was kind of like your earliest memories of gaming then? Like what kind of got you into that initially?
I think the games that I definitely spent the most time playing as a kid was like, yeah, doing like StarCraft there, but I played a ton of Diablo 2 back in the day. I also remember as a little kid playing a Mech Warrior.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah,
That
right?
was the jam when you were
It
little.
was so good.
Yeah.
But of course, I also played console games, right? You played a bunch of like Tribes Aerial Assault and Halo once that came out, Smash.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Very cool. Man, you feel like you hit the high points of like, you just told me a bunch of games that are like cool to like, right? Yeah. Thinking like, what did I play, right? Like it doesn't, the list doesn't sound nearly as good. Okay, just another, like high level, easy softball like background question. Your name. How did you decide on FEqualsMA?
So it was actually a joke in college. Originally, I used to play under the username Castle, and that's actually I have like an alt that I play on sometimes for StarCraft. That's Castle. But I have a friend who in undergrad, he was also on the StarCraft team, and his name was PV equals NRT. He had just been using that forever for everything. And he and I got slotted in and we're playing the 2v2 slots for CSL. And then I thought it was funny at the beginning of like sophomore year to be like, hey, you know what? Like, let's have matching names. I'm going to like change, because you could change your usernames however many times you wanted back then. So, like I changed to that and then just never bothered changing it away. So
that's funny.
Have to give tribute to PV equals NRT. If you see him on ladder, he's a Terran player. But that's where it came from.
That's funny. See, because I met you first, right? And I watched your stream and I kind of saw him hanging out in the chat and I just kind of assumed, oh, this is FEqualsMA's friend, and probably picked a name to, match him, and maybe it's his brother or something. Like I wasn't sure. That's funny.
Yeah, no, it was quite the reverse. And there have been a couple times where I'm like, oh, I should really like change my name, like go back, but then I don't know. It's whatever.
Yeah, you get known for something, right? It can kind of stick with you that way for sure.
Yep.
So on the subject of your stream, like what made you initially decide to dive into that?
Yeah, I think I liked the idea. Like I'm a pretty social person and I like the idea of like interacting. Like StarCraft I love as a 1v1 game, but I think the thing that kind of if it was just the 1v1 game in a bubble, I don't think I would find the game nearly as enjoyable. I
Mm,
think it's having the community and like people to talk to. You know, I spent a
yeah.
lot of time hanging out with like Turkey Dano and HJax and like talking to folks. And I kind of was like, hey, I can play StarCraft and I can stream, like interact with people. And I mean, I created my account back when it was like Justin TV, and
Yep.
I didn't really stream at all back then. But it was like it was always when I was like, oh, this could be a fun thing to get into. Um, but yeah, nothing ever professional, but just like
Mhm.
a fun hobby.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I'm a fellow sort of old account person. I think I made mine
Mhm.
shortly after the changeover from Justin
Mhm.
TV to Twitch. Like they'd gotten the URL, but I
Mhm.
still like didn't understand really what it was or why I wanted an account. It was just like a thing to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so when did you actually like start streaming in earnest then? If you're a fellow old account person.
So I think I like streamed once or twice
Mm,
in college. Didn't really do it, but then I guess maybe a year and a half ago ish. Um, sometime 2019, I was like wrapping up work with one company and starting to do another thing. I was like, hey, I want to get back into StarCraft and I
mm,
want to start like streaming. And then I started trying to stick. And for a while, I was like sticking to like a pretty regular schedule, like 2 or 3 times a week.
hmm.
And then lots of things have changed over the past year.
Yeah.
There have been times where I've streamed more consistently, and definitely times like recently where I've been not as consistent in terms of
Hmm.
keeping up the stream. So
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So did you just and if you don't want to talk about professional life, totally fine. But
no.
did you graduate like fairly recently then, or have you been like a working professional for some time?
Yeah, I graduated back in 2013
Mm-hmm.
from Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo Mustangs. Yeah, so graduated from there. Worked down near San Luis Obispo, like lived there and commuted.
Mm-hmm.
Worked for an aerospace company for a year and a half. My undergrad was in mechanical engineering.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then there are a number of stories, a number of reasons as to why I left the company that I was at, but I decided to leave. Um, and I actually uh, I quit my salary benefit 401k whatever job
Mm-hmm.
to take an internship in San Francisco. It was
Mm-hmm.
paid, but it was certainly making less money and with no benefits.
Mm-hmm.
So moved up to the Bay Area. My family is in the Bay Area, so they like for the first few months I just crashed with my parents, saved up a little bit of money, and then eventually moved into San Francisco proper.
Mm-hmm.
The internship turned into a full-time job. Worked at that company for several years. So I don't know how much you want me to go into this.
We've got
Um,
time, man. Go for it.
so the company that I worked at was a company called Other Lab. And basically, it's almost like an incubator is a poor way of describing it, but it's
Mm,
kind of like that idea where there are several different independent projects. They're all working under the same roof, sharing equipment, that kind of thing. So
mm-hmm. Yeah.
the internship was with one team. I hung out with them for 9 months to a year, then moved over to another team and worked with them for a couple years. And I guess I should also take a step back and say that when I halfway through undergrad, I was like, hey, I think I want to go into teaching,
Mm-hmm.
but I want to get industry experience first. So I'm going to go work as a
Ah.
mechanical engineer for a while and then go teach high school physics and
Mm-hmm.
engineering. So that was
Yeah.
kind of my thought. So in any case, I worked at this company, worked for a year on an orthopedic robotics
Mm-hmm.
team, so making exoskeletons.
Yeah.
Um, and then the CEO of the incubator, quote unquote, basically was like, hey, I've got a project that kind of melds engineering with education. Are you interested? And I was like,
Mm,
heck yeah.
yeah.
So I worked for 2 years at a company called How Tunes, which made educational kits for kids. Basically, like you get a thing, you learn how to like build something.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really cool opportunity. Unfortunately, we ran out of funding after 2 years. So
Happens. Yeah.
it happens. It happens. So then I transitioned over to another one of the companies within the Other Lab family
Mm-hmm.
that was working on thermally adaptive textiles.
Oh.
So just doing some material science stuff and,
Mm-hmm.
and making machines for that. Worked there for a while. Finally decided, hey, I'm almost 30 and I wanted to go into teaching. I should probably, I should set this goal. I'm going to be in a classroom by the time I'm 30.
Mm,
And so things kind of wrapped up with that project. And right around the same time, I applied to grad school, got in, and so I'm currently working on my master's in education. Um, and yeah, so basically, I stopped working at Other Lab in December of time is a weird thing. December of 2019. Yeah, that's the right year. And I was like, all right, cool. I'm gonna like take some time off. I'm gonna like travel. I've got a few months before school starts. And then a friend of mine was like, hey, I know you've got like 6 months before school starts. Do you want to spend like a month or two doing some contracting stuff? So I was like, yeah, I've got plenty of time. So I like contracted, put my travel plans on delay. Contracted for a couple months at Airbnb, and then yeah, the pandemic hit, and then I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna sit here, and that's when I really started playing a lot of StarCraft and really started streaming more regularly just in that period between like February through when school started.
Yeah, it's funny you say like streaming a lot, because I feel like I remember you streaming very consistently before that, right? Like I'm thinking pre-pandemic where I was, and like I have a lot of memories of like the gym that I would go to do cardio, just a little one right by my place, like always watching your stream just because of the time of day that it was, right? And this was a time where like Printf was really pushing you too. Like I would always see him in your chat and stuff. And I remember like
September.
Yeah, exactly around that time frame. Yeah, so it's funny you say, that it ramped up. But yeah, interesting. It's funny to me, I definitely had a strong awareness of the sort of like deep undercurrent of engineers in StarCraft, right? Like particularly software, but really all kinds of engineers and people in the sciences. But I've been very surprised as I've been kind of asking around, what do people do and stuff, at the number of educators or people who are in some way interested in education. It's been something that like I never really knew was there, and I feel like it doesn't get talked about in the way that people are like, oh yeah, all those software nerd guys, that they all love StarCraft. It's interesting. I don't know if I can make heads or tails of it though. It's like, what is that?
I don't know. I think definitely the engineer software thing, like that whole meme, it makes sense. Like, oh, these are people that spend all their time on computers anyway, right? Yep. But you're right. I think there are a lot of people that have a passion for like learning, and I think maybe that lends itself to this game because there's so much to learn about StarCraft, and it's such like a deep thing.
Yeah.
Again,
sorry, what?
It's all speculation. Sorry.
Oh, sure. No, I totally buy it. Like the combination of high skill ceiling, full blame or credit on yourself, right? And actually, I still feel really good tooling for like self-analysis compared to I look at other games, like there are a few that do it well, but it's like surprisingly kind of spare, I think, compared to what I get when I end a StarCraft match. Like, there are decent analytics that come out of it, and particularly when you consider all the third-party stuff that's available too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've been playing a lot of other games as well as StarCraft, and the first thing that comes to mind is like League of Legends, for instance. It's very hard in that game to look at the game and decide, oh, did we lose because I made a series of mistakes or my team made a series of mistakes? It's like that accountability isn't quite there. But as you mentioned with StarCraft, it's like I can go back and like that replay, it's just me. I can see I wasn't making workers, or I, let the Widow Mines burrow and kill my mineral line. Like it's all very trackable. You can identify things to focus on and improve.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a little bit torn as to which question to ask you, but I'll go with do you have sort of a particular style or strategy that you take in approaching your learning in the game?
I think I have not read as much in terms of like I know like the Archives Book Club, you guys talk a lot about really great tactics and strategies that are tools that people can employ. I haven't really delved too much into that kind of thing. I guess my approach, so sometimes I play and it's just like I'm just gonna play right now just to like play, and I'm not gonna think about focusing. It's almost like a break from the workout. Just because I feel like just grinding games does over time like you will subtly pick things up.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, there's certainly times where it's like, I need to focus on this skill. And I remember climbing into, I think, 50 games where I was like, hey, HJax, I need you to play Zerg right now. And we're going to play on Nightshade because I have a 15% win ratio against Zerg on Nightshade.
Yeah.
And I played against him. We played 30 games and I won one of them. But every time we went back and we watched, like, okay, this is something I can do better. This is an area where I tried to cut a corner and got punished, or this is an area where my opponent cut a corner and I didn't punish them. And eventually it got to the point where it's like, okay, now I'm feeling a lot better about this matchup on this map. So like really just like drilling in and be like, hey, okay, this is the problem, identifying exactly what it is, and then like just repetition, just hitting that thing over and over and over is kind of what I try to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You definitely have, we've had a lot of conversations in the past about learning style. So this is a little bit me, asking things that I kind of already know. But obviously people watching this on YouTube or whatnot aren't going to have that. You are a grinder for sure. Like you are a self-described grinder. And I would say even, compared to other people that I've seen, has that kind of always been your way with games? Is that a thing that StarCraft particularly brings out of you? What do you think there?
I think that's definitely something. I think that's just like, it's not a StarCraft unique thing. I think it's definitely rather than getting like frustrated or discouraged, if I am failing to do something, it almost just like emboldens me, and it's like I'm just so stubborn that I'm like, no, I'm not going to give up. Like I'm going to like do this until I succeed. Kind of thing. Which definitely has its downsides as well. I remember last season, or not last season, like a couple seasons ago, I hit the GM mark and I was like in there, and it was like the last day and Grandmaster was like closing, and I'm like, cool, I'm in, this is great. And then I logged on and like saw that I got demoted, and I started to panic. So I was like, wait, do I not have 30 games? What happened? Turns out, if I had literally done nothing, I would have gotten re-promoted an hour later and would have like ended the season. But I just didn't realize that. So I was like, okay, well, you know what? We're gonna play a game. We're just gonna like win. And I proceeded to then lose, I think, 10 games in a row. And HJax is like sitting there watching me, and it just slowly, and it was like I was losing to, sure, I'd lose to like a 5-6 player, but then I'd lose to like a 4-2 player, and it was just like my MMR just like plummeted. And I think for me, there were definitely times where I was focused on the number, which I think is a little bit unhealthy. I think like being like, oh, this is my MMR number, I got to get this number up. I'm not sure that that's like the best way to think about things. Actually, I'm fairly confident that that's not the best way to think about things. But I think like, in that moment, it wasn't even about like getting the MMR. It's like, I'm going to play until I win. And that stubbornness, like I said, I ended that night in not the best headspace because I proceeded to lose a whole bunch of games in a row.
Totally, yeah. And I guess you bleed a lot of MMR as well, which is unfortunate when you're
sitting
on it. Yeah, interesting. What about in life in general? Like, do you have the same kind of thing? If you have like a hard problem at work or something, do you kind of go hard like that?
Yeah, I think so. So what's interesting is I almost have like two conflicting things, right? One part of me is like very much like, I'm going to work on this until I like get it. But at the same time, I also find myself like getting bored a lot. So like it's weird. And I don't know exactly, I'm trying to figure out what exactly the pattern is. But it's like, I think I will kind of just be bouncing around until something catches my eye, and then I like tunnel vision super hard on that thing. And then it's like, cool, check that off the box, let's go to the next thing. And then like I'll tunnel vision super hard on that. I think that is a pattern. I'm trying to think about like work specifically, like that's definitely happened a little bit, but even on other things, it's like, hey, like I want to get my paragliding license, I'm going to go to the mountain like every weekend and like continue getting my launches in there. And then I got my license, and then like 2 weeks after that I went to Colombia and like flew in Colombia with a bunch of people. And then like after that I like haven't, like I've flown like 3 times since then, right? I just like super focused on like, this is a really cool thing, this has my attention. And then like transitioned after.
I definitely completely understand you there because I have a very similar personality trait, I think, where I very easily get really, really passionate about whatever thing I think is cool. And it like consumes my brain, even if I'm not doing the thing. I'm like
Yeah.
thinking about the thing, or how could I do the thing better tomorrow, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's kind
Yeah,
of fun
for
though.
sure.
I mean, if you really like something, like the feeling of really, really liking something and engaging with it, I feel like is just a nice thing, like to unleash
Yeah.
your energy in that way.
Yeah, for sure.
So, changing gears a little bit here, how do you kind of think of yourself in terms of like style as a player? Like, if you had to kind of summarize that.
Um, hmm. So what's interesting is I think I had a style before I started going down the dark rabbit hole that is the canon rushes. I
Uh
don't think
huh.
I've ever been a truly standard player.
Mm.
I think it's one of those it's like, oh, I'm like bored of like that everybody is like explored this space. I want to
Hmm.
find something really new. I remember in undergrad really drilling and like trying to practice this build that, gosh, I think it was during Heart of the Swarm. It was either Heart of the Swarm or Legacy or Wings of Liberty. And I'm failing to remember the gentleman's name, but there was a French Protoss player who like wasn't super well known, but he was like a pro,
Hmm.
and he had this uh fast forge +1 like zealot with like a warp prism like
Hmm.
all in. It was like
Yeah.
I don't remember if it was like one base or two base, but you like basically you load a probe and 3 zealots in, you go to their base and you drop a bunch of cannons under the prism and make zealots inside the base. And like so like stuff like that. I mean, that one has cannon in it. So again, I guess
Sure.
maybe there's early tendencies there. But I think I don't like playing a game that feels completely mapped out. I like
Mm.
trying something new. I like doing something that is unexpected. Um, and I think I definitely don't like being on the back foot. That's
Mm.
something that I've really discovered. And I think
Yeah.
that's why I've gotten into these very aggressive strategies, right? Going for the cannon rush is like, okay, I am taking control of the tempo. I am driving the cadence of this game.
Hmm.
Or I know you were practicing that like two base, like charge lot like 8 gate chart or 7 gate, however many gates,
Hmm.
charge lot thing that like we saw was it Prince do
Yeah.
um, in GSL,
Hmm.
uh, and it feels like builds like that. Like I get to take a little bit of control, and then I
Hmm.
don't have to worry about the Widow Mines coming in because my opponent's distracted, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah. You said it right with that build order example. I definitely kind of empathize with the notion of not wanting to just like cede initiative to my opponent and just
mhm.
oh yeah, you dictate the game to me and I'll just I have to be good at any of the different pop quiz answers that you might ask me for. Like, no, how about I quiz you instead? I definitely like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So what made you then, it sounds like maybe your bloodline got tainted early with this fast forge build, but what did make you decide to go down the cannon rush path?
I think what made me decide to go down it is like, okay, I think what happened is it was like 2019, and I was like, you know what, I want to get back into StarCraft. I had hit Masters once or twice, but I was like, I was like a Diamond Forever player, right? I
Mm-hmm.
can go back and look at my account. It's like literally like first season through like 10th season was all like Diamond, 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 and then it
Mm-hmm.
was like some random Heart of the Swarm, like, oh, you hit Masters because Blizzard messed something up, and then like Diamond, 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 Diamond. I was like, okay, I want to get better at this. How do I really drill down and focus? And I was like, okay, I want to do something where I can get a lot of reps in, and I want to play just a lot of games like over and over and over. Um, and I realized like, okay, like cannon rushing is like something where the games are really short. I will get to be repetitive and like focus on the same thing really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And my goal was to like focus on a couple of things. So I was like, okay, I want to get better at microing, right? And I know
Yep.
that I'm going to have to be able to control probes here. I'm going to have to be able to control like multiple probes simultaneously, which is
Mm-hmm.
something that like I was very much a box everything, a move it
Yeah.
kind of person. Um, if I had Sentries and High Templar, well, one of those casters isn't getting used. Um, I never really got into using the F2 button just because I didn't like reaching my hand that far up on the keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
But but yeah, so I guess I decided, okay, we're going to drill down. We're going to focus on cannon rushing, just to improve like those abilities of being able to like control multiple things at once,
Mm-hmm.
and like be able to make the units go where I want them to do and drop buildings at the
Mm-hmm.
times. Um, and then it just kind of like kept evolving from there. And I learned how complex and like
Yeah.
I don't know, it's definitely the first when I started doing it, I wasn't aware of printf, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think I was streaming and a guy, I think his name now is like Kata SC2, but
Mm-hmm.
Uriel was something a lot of people know him by.
Yeah.
Popped in my stream and he was like, "Hey, like don't cannon rush the way that you're cannon rushing. Go watch this printf guy
Yeah.
and do what he's doing." Um, and so then I did that. Yeah, I watched that, and I even got, I was like, "Hey, like my name's FEqualsMA. Can I like buy a lesson from you?" And I got a couple lessons from
Mm-hmm.
Printf. And like you said, there's a period of time where he was like hanging out in my chat a lot,
Mm-hmm.
giving a lot of feedback, which is like super helpful. Uh, and I think I can honestly say, even though I like was only cannon rushing for a year, um, my macro skills like improved.
Mm-hmm.
Like I went back and like played macro games, and like my MMR on a macro count is like higher
Yep.
than it was. I think right
Yep.
now I'm floating so around like 4 or 5. And I've only really just started trying to get back into macro, whereas
Mm.
before I think I was in like 4K ish
Yeah.
range. So
Yeah, I jumped up a league, I think, over like
yeah.
doing cannon rushes. The two biggest jumps that I remember for myself, one came from H Jackson, the other one came from Printf. So it's funny, we have a lot of shared lineage in that way,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
In terms of players that we've stolen skill from. But
Mhm.
yeah, with H Jacks, it was literally like, here, kid, let me show you how to not take terrible fights, like, by funneling your army into concaves up a ramp kind of thing.
Yeah.
And with Printf, it was literally, yeah, just giving me a way to turn every game into a micro situation so that all of a
Mhm.
sudden, it doesn't take me as long. It's not as hard to control units or make them do the right thing. Or even literally, I feel like reading the screen, like internalizing information on the screen when I'm looking at an army feels quicker in a way that makes my macro better. And it's a strange thing. Like, I'm really glad to hear you say that, because I always kind of thought that I was like deluding myself or crazy, or I don't know. But yeah, to hear you say that actually is really validating.
Yeah, I mean, it could be we're drinking the same Kool-Aid, but
Could be, yeah.
uh, actually that last thing that you mentioned, just like the amount of time that I spend looking at a screen has dramatically reduced,
Mm,
right? Like before it's like, okay, I'm gonna like look at my probe and I'm gonna watch my probe, and then I'm gonna make my probe move, and then I'm gonna go back to my base, and then I'm gonna like make a probe, then I'm gonna sit here, and then I'm gonna grab another probe, and then I'm gonna take my gas,
yep.
and it's like just the amount of time that I spend dwelling on one screen is just
Hmm.
like very minimal now.
Right.
So that's a very good observation that you made.
Oh, thank you. Is there anything, you kind of mentioned you initially were cannon rushing and you kind of had some reasons for it, but you didn't understand this sort of rich world of like weird canon trivia, right? Is there anything that stands out in your memory as being like a huge moment where your brain was just like, wait, what? Like, it works that way?
Yeah, there have been a couple. I mean, the first one, the biggest one that pops in my mind is like intentionally building structures to squirt probes out
Mm-hmm.
was something that was just like a wait, what?
Uh-huh.
And then like I went back and like did some science, and I think I read like a Reddit post that that Printf made that like showed a series of like 15 pylons, and he like built a thing, and the probe like goes like all the way zigzagging up through them and pops out. I don't know if you've seen the gif
I
of that, but
I
it's
feel like I've read some of his Reddit posts about that stuff, about like probe mechanics, but I don't remember the post you're talking about. I'd have to go
it
dig that
was
up.
yeah, it was, I don't know, but in any case, just learning a little bit about that, um, and just this idea of um, like building structures and then like canceling them when you realize that you don't need them, which
Mm,
you don't like. I don't really use that too much in like play, in my macro play now.
yeah.
But like the idea of like I'm going to make these pylons with the full intention of like canceling them,
Mm-hmm.
and like, oh, it's only cost me 25 minerals. And actually, I have started in most of my macro games. I fake cannon rush.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, and just because the main goal is in the future, I'll maybe cannon rush half the time and fake it the other half in
Mm-hmm.
macro, just to keep my opponents on their toes, right? So they can't
Yeah.
hard counter. Uh, and yeah, just like you send a probe in, and it's like, all right, cool. He pulled 4 SCVs, and I know that if he's pulled 4 SCVs, I let this thing basically go all the way until it finishes, and then I cancel, and I'm going to wind up like 100 minerals ahead just because of the mining time lost.
Yeah, yeah.
So just little things like that, I think.
Yeah, very cool. Do you feel like you're at the point where you can sort of play to like ladder image type stuff? Like, do you get people like trying to metagame cannon rushes and then you just play normal?
I haven't started doing that yet. Actually, I did that in one game recently against Vibe, and it was really funny. So I hit Vibe. It was a rough night. I hit Vibe like 5 times around. I actually have an okay win rate against Vibe's Zerg. But Vibe was off racing his Protoss that evening, and what's interesting is Vibe usually when he's playing Zerg doesn't metagame at all, which I like. I super, I think that's really great practice because it's like, hey, I want to be able to beat someone who's cannon rushing me when I don't know it's coming. So if I'm playing in a tournament, like I can do that kind of thing. So I really respect that, and I think that's a great way to practice. When he's playing Protoss, he does not do that because it's not his main race. He's not as concerned about that.
Yeah.
So he was like blind gate forging every game. So there was actually the like 5th game that we played. I just went gate core or gate gas core.
Sure.
Very standard Protoss build order, but I still sent that first probe over, and I like dropped the thing, and I actually let my pylon finish because I saw his forge wasn't done yet, and so he let his forge finish.
Yeah,
I was like, all right, cool, and then I walked out, many minerals ahead because he also pulled 2 and had them controlling the low ground and had a bunch of stuff. I came out of the early game ahead there. I ended up losing the game overall, unfortunately. Got a little bit ambitious with trying to take bases while teching. But yeah, I haven't started doing it too much yet, just because at this point my macro level is around, like I said, like 4, 5, 4, 4. Whereas I'm like 5-1, 5-2 right now. And so I don't think that I would be able to pull off the macro game against this high level players. So I'm currently focusing on building up those skills, working on them on my alt, and hopefully one day it'll merge and the stars will align.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you sort of divide up your practice. You have an account for cannons, which you're stronger in, and you have an account for macro, which you're trying to kind of raise up.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Exactly.
Very cool. How did you kind of, when you decided, okay, I'm gonna switch my focus from doing cannon stuff to macro? Well, I guess first, what made you decide to do it? Was it getting GM with cannons and then kind of shifting focus, or?
Yeah, I think it was like, okay, I got GM with cannons. Kind of like ticked that box.
Yep.
I don't know. It was that, but it's also one of those like, okay, realistically, like I'm at a level where I am like fairly competitive. Obviously, I'm not like gonna be like taking any like EPT cups or anything.
Sure.
But like I can play in like small in-house tournaments and like do pretty well.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, okay, I've reached that level, which is a level that I'm satisfied with, right? I'm not gonna go become a professional StarCraft player.
Right.
So like at that tier, like, okay, yeah, I'm like the 5-5-3 level. Let me start working on this other thing, bring that up, and then I'll kind of like stutter step. Eventually everything will be played back on my main account, right? And it'll just all be based on like, oh, like I feel like cannoning this game, or I feel like whatever. So
yeah, totally.
I don't know if that really answers the question.
Yeah, no, that does. And then so when you kind of made the decision, okay, I'm gonna get this other account. I've ticked the box. I'm ready to raise up sort of the other half of my ability or my mind, right? Did you have any thoughts about what that would look like in terms of build orders you want to do, or how are you gonna get back into the swing? Obviously macroed before, so it's not like totally foreign.
Yeah. I talked to HJax a little bit, talked to Turkey Dano, talked to even Cuddle Bear. I mean, I know Max plays Terran, but it's just like that group of people. I was like, hey, I'm gonna like start macroing. Also, there's a little bit of you asked what made me start macroing. I guess there's a little bit of pushing by HJax, like, hey, you should do this now. Let's come back to my side of the river, kind of thing. And yeah, I started looking at stuff, and I know that this might be changing, but I'm not a huge fan of Stargate units. I just feel like they're very flimsy, and I have not had a huge resonance with them, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I'm much more of a like mass gateway or like gateway and robo kind
Mm-hmm.
of player.
Yep.
And so I've been doing that, and that's actually been what a lot of my playing has been
Mm-hmm.
recently. Just going for like mass gateway styles. Getting like fast blink. Like I've been opening very standard. Against Terran, you get like blink and a couple stalkers to deflect the inevitable medevac with either
Right.
Hellions or Widow Mines or the Liberator, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you go into charge and get Storm, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's been the approach that I've been kind of going. Against Zerg, I've been doing a lot of Glaive Adept openings as well.
Yeah. I am, as you know, a big fan of the Glaive Adept.
the ladies, put those ladies in chat. Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah. Very cool. So then I'm this is me being totally selfish because this like probably isn't nearly as relevant to the interview as it is for me just wanting to get better at the game, but I'm gonna ask it anyway.
Yeah.
So you talked before about not liking, viscerally almost the feeling of ceding initiative to your opponent, right?
Totally.
And you just described, at least in the PvT example, a style which for me has always felt a little bit like the Terran gets to do too much stuff to me that I don't really want. How'd you get over that mental hurdle, or maybe you're thinking about it differently than I do?
I let HJX beat me up for 2 hours one night, and then it was really painful. The first couple games you can watch, and he's like, I'm going to hit you like at 4:30. There will be Widow Mines in your base. Like, so it's not like I'm surprising you. Like, that this is gonna be happening. And like the first couple games, I think I actually lost more workers than if I had done nothing, because I'd like pull the workers and they would like get Widow Mine. Oh hey, it's Vibe. Welcome to the party, everybody.
Welcome in, everybody. Everybody from Vibe's place. You probably know me. You probably saw the thing that Vibe just did with me. Wonderful to have you here. My name's Aret, if you don't know me, but more importantly, we've got FEqualsMA here, and we're doing a little interview. You're probably about a little over halfway through here. This will be on YouTube, so if you like what we're talking about, you want to know more about this very fascinating individual, that'll be available for you probably live like tomorrow night around this time. But yeah, thank you so much, Vibe. Wonderful to have everybody here. Really appreciate you. And I forgot what we were talking about, man.
We're talking about seeding initiative and stuff like that. With the Widow Mines. So yeah, and Vibe, you missed it. I was talking about how you kicked my butt a bunch of times in a row the other night earlier.
We did really, truly just tell a Vibe story right before you guys all got here. So he knew.
This is perfect timing. You felt it with your spidey senses. But yeah, so basically, I think the first couple times he like flew the Medevacs in, dropped the mines, and I like grabbed all the workers and tried to move them, and because they all bunched up, they just like more of them died.
Right.
And it felt awful as you expect. But then I just like kept on going, and it basically what I guess after playing the however many dozens and dozens of games, I've gotten to the point where I feel a lot more comfortable. Like, hey, this isn't my opponent taking initiative here. This is my opponent trying to do something, and as long as I am prepared and I bat it away, it's almost like I'm parrying you, and now I get to come at you, right? Because if you kill the medevac, I get to walk across the map and play playing stalkers now, and I'll have an observer, and I can get in your main and start killing your add-ons. So it's like, it's almost like setting a trap for your opponent, kind of thing. Is I think how I've started trying to think about it. It's still there's still a little bit of like, oh, where is it? Especially if it comes late, right? If it's coming at like 4:45 or like 5 minutes. You're also talking about what it's like where's the medevac? Oh, it's not here. Okay, well I'm gonna take my third and I think I can start walking out. And then we can do that.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I can feel a little bit of like, it's almost a little bit of mental gymnastics, right? Where it's like, if I can just convince myself that it's proactive to wait for the Widow Mine drop, then I'll still feel like I'm mentally in my happy place about this, right? But I could definitely see how, you're not like deluding yourself to think that, because all Terrans do hit some kind of timing at around that point in the game. And as you say, like having some stalkers in the right spot, is an answer, right? So yeah, that's interesting. So another thing that you said here, as by way of kind of setting up the story, is that you were doing customs with HJX, right? Who's, I think, still quite good on his off races, right? I mean, he's you know,
Yeah.
very, very strong GM with Protoss, but his off races are at least like high masters, right?
Yeah, I would say so. It's actually funny playing against his Zerg when I was, like I said, when I was like trying to practice, and there was like that period of time. I think at least his cannon rush defense with Zerg
Oh,
is stronger than
unbelievable.
like
Yeah.
yeah, it's stronger than like a lot of the 5-5 players that I've been like hitting on ladder.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. So I guess I'm curious then, because you kind of, phrased it as like, I got beat up by H-Jacks, a million games in a row kind of thing. So how do you sort of think about that? Because I find that's a very controversial one. The idea of like, I'm going to hop in a game with somebody who can wipe the floor with me in this matchup that I'm struggling in. And some people are like, yeah, that's the best way for me to learn, is to just like get my ass kicked and then look at why. And
mhm.
other people are like, I need to at least feel a sensation of like traction in the matchup. Like there's some amounts of momentum or learning or like something good is happening. Um, how do you kind of think about that?
Yeah, I think those are almost like two different situations for me. I mean, that was the
Mm,
reason that like I started making, I made the alt account a few months ago. And
yes.
the reason I did that is because I realized, okay, yeah, I started trying to macro when I was playing like unranked on my main, and it just felt like too big of a skill gap,
Uh huh.
right? It's like, okay,
Hmm.
I'm not really uh getting anything done here. And I feel like if you're trying to get better at something specific, um, going to customs is like the best thing, right? So in that case, it's like
Yeah.
I need to get better at not just dying to widow mines.
Hmm.
So that's why I set up customs and had someone just do the exact same thing, like fly medevacs in with widow mines over and over and over.
Hmm.
If I had tried to do that on ladder, I'm going to have people doing all sorts of weird, funky things. I'm going to have people proxy reapering and
Yep.
like proxy full raxing, and then the people that just like have their medevac widow mine thing hit it 5.5 minutes, right? Just
Right.
so
Yeah.
having that consistency.
Hmm.
Even though I knew that I probably wasn't going to be able to win later in the game, the focus was okay, for the first 5 minutes, am I at the probe count that I want to be at? Am I, hitting, getting my nexus down, my third nexus on time, and am I deflecting whatever harassment?
Hmm.
Um, and even though I know we played the games on after that point, and
Mm.
oftentimes if I didn't take a huge amount of damage, then I would be in a good spot, and the games were okay. I think he definitely still won the vast majority of them. Um, I could go look. I think I was looking earlier. My win rate against H Jacks. I pulled up like Solite, and it was like
Yeah.
we've played 130 games or something,
Wow.
and I've won 13 of them.
Oh
so
man.
so definitely one of those like I still get the wiped with in terms of the rest of the game, but I think just the like okay, this time I didn't lose all my workers to widow
Hmm.
mine was
Hmm.
the kind of mental stabilizing agent that I latched
Yeah.
onto.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually really, really like that. I feel like I'm gonna get use out of that once I have use out of this again and can play.
For
Um,
sure.
yeah, man, that's actually really cool because it almost sets it up like, okay, the success, right? I'm gonna
Mhm.
grade,
Yeah.
the success of this on this part of the game.
Yep.
And then it's almost like, okay, I did that, right?
Mhm.
And I guess if you wanted to be really extreme with it, you could succeed at defending the Widow Mine drop and then literally exit the game and do it again.
Yeah.
But there's also kind of an interesting thing to your point earlier about how, being a grinder and just jamming games, right, can kind of
Mhm.
like, there's this like passive absorption thing that happens, right?
Mhm.
And
Yep.
provided you have the time and the interest, like that is a way to grow skill, right? You're kind of just farming for like, all right, let my lizard brain just pick up whatever it's going to pick up kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I could definitely see how if you put yourself in a position emotionally where you're like, okay, I did the thing, right? The Widow
Mhm.
Mine drop came in. I still have a worker line. Fantastic. Now
Yeah.
we're
We
on free
won.
play. Like I
Yeah.
could do what I could experiment with comps I'm bad at. I could,
Mhm.
whatever. I
Yeah.
could expand aggressively and just see if he punishes me. There's all kinds of like, you could just kind of have fun with it. I feel like that is something I have not heard anyone describe, and
Mhm.
it sounds like a really, really, really good way to train. Um,
Yeah.
Now, obviously, like the idea of jamming customs with a friend is not novel, but I've never heard anybody talk about the psychological piece of it in the way that you did. So thank you for that. That's amazing.
For sure. I would be more than happy to custom with you. I cannot claim that my off races will be nearly as adequate in hitting those things, but I'm sure you could probably convince once your wrist is all better. You
Yeah,
can
yeah.
convince other folks to
True.
climb in.
Yeah, definitely. Gosh, I've got a ways to climb, I think, before I can challenge him. So you did mention, there's kind of that other piece of it where you did decide to, make an alt account for your macro
Mhm.
play because you felt like, maybe your sort of inflated MMR on the Canon account was just making it
Mhm.
too big of a gap.
Yeah.
So is the way that you're thinking about that just that when you have sort of random exposure to whatever the heck your opponent wants to do, that just like simply taking an ass kicking isn't informative enough in terms of growing your skill?
Um, I think what it was is I was like, okay, I'm dying a lot to the Widow Mines, so I need
Hmm.
to grind a bunch of games and solve this problem. And then I
Yeah,
felt
yeah,
like I
yeah.
solved that problem, and then it's like,
Hmm.
all right, now I'm going to go back to the ladder and figure out what's kicking my ass again. And
Yeah,
then once I do that, then go back, find a friend, be like, hey, you know what? I've moved past this part. Now I'm at 3 bases, uh, but I'm like, taking engagements poorly, or I'm falling behind in my upgrades, so I just need to do that. And I mean, even that kind of thing is something that I could just do in a custom against a computer, right?
mm,
Just making sure that I, take my third base by 430, that I get, my double forge down, just against Terran, for instance,
sure. Hmm.
and that I start those upgrades.
Yeah,
Um, but I think it was one of those, okay, I checked the box. Now I'm going to go back, re-expose myself to the ladder world, like play a bunch of games, collect some amount of, albeit, oh gosh, what's the word? Uh, right, yeah, I'm not documenting my games as well as I
hmm,
did when I was like trying to grind the canon games.
yeah,
So the evidence is a little bit like subjective.
mm, hmm,
But basically be like, okay, it feels like I'm losing a lot to this, or I'm
yeah,
having trouble. It feels like I'm having trouble with this.
hmm,
Let me go try to solve that problem somewhere else in
yeah, yeah.
custom.
That makes a lot of sense. So kind of twisting between, like iterating between these two, go farm for like what are my problems, and then once you kind of
Mhm.
identify them, then focus them down and go, okay, I'm going to make that not be a problem, and then go
Yep.
back to farming for, yeah, interesting. So
Mhm.
we've kind of talked a lot about our sort of mutual mentors here.
Yeah.
I'm curious, kind of the origin story there for you in terms of how all that mapped out. So you mentioned that you did some coaching, some like paid printf to do some coaching with you, and then he was kind of hanging out in your stream a lot. Was he the initial kind of link to like the rest of the University of Connecticut team, or how did that go?
So it was a weird crossing of stars in a way. So I started doing that, and I think around the same time, like Xenodactyl was also getting
Mm,
uh, coached by Printf, and so I like saw him getting coached by Printf at one point,
yeah,
and then actually like hit him like, so I started like watching his stream, kind of like how you mentioned you like have been started watching my stream when you're at the gym.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I would like throw Xenodactyl stream up a little bit, and then I ended up like hitting him online,
Hmm.
and like playing a game against him. And then I saw that he was on a team, and I was like, hey, like afterwards, we were like chatting because like he's like a disciple, like
Yeah.
he was getting lessons from Printf,
Uh
and so
huh.
we were talking after game. I was like, oh, I've been thinking about like joining a team. I don't really know how to do that. I mean, my only exposure to like joining a team was like in college. I joined like a collegiate team.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and he's like, oh yeah, like you should totally like join Alpha X, like come on, like hang out. And he actually I didn't do it immediately, uh but he knew that I lived here in San Francisco, and he was actually going to be visiting. This is again in the before times.
Yeah. Right.
He was going to be visiting San Francisco,
Hmm.
um and he was like, hey, do you want to get like coffee or something? And I was like, yeah. So he and I met up, got coffee, chatted a little bit, talked about memes, and then I asked him a little bit more about like, so what does it take to be in the team? What are their
Yeah.
expectations? And then I ended up joining Alpha X, and so through that, I ended up actually playing against H-Jax in an in-house cup where he spanked me hard. This is the he's like 5'5" and I'm like 4'2" kind of spanking.
Hmm.
Um, and so yeah, so like I kind of like met him a little bit, and then he had like heard about me like from Dylan or from Printf
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
they're friends, and so
Yeah.
it kind of was this like multi-pronged thing. So I started hanging out with both of them, and
Uh
then
huh.
with Printf and HJax comes Turkey
Of course.
Dano,
Yep.
So I've been hanging out with those folks, and then getting more involved with some of the other Alpha X people like Cuddle Bear and all the other folks that hang out with that crowd.
Yeah, interesting. So just for the record, Alpha X flew Xenodactyl up to SF to recruit you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. That was.
It just astounds me what y'all have been able to do with the sponsorship budgets and the marketing. It truly is amazing.
It's. I mean, we just picked up Akvaron is now a proud member of Alpha X. So
very, very cool. Let's see. So
actually, I think I'm wearing my jersey from the casting that I was doing earlier.
Yeah, actually, so those are both kind of interesting topics. I guess first we'll get to the casting, but first let's talk just about, kind of your experiences on Alpha X. So I had Rushy on was it about a week ago maybe? And I was, kind of getting his whole story of he's got a sort of different perspective and path into the organization than you. And we gushed a lot about all the amazing people that, he's worked with over there and everything. But I'm just curious, what your experience has been like and what, maybe what were your expectations going in? Like, what did you think this would be? Were you pleasantly surprised? How did it feel kind of for you?
Joining the team, or
joining the team and just the whole thing, because you said you at first you didn't do it, then you kind of had coffee with Zeno and said, okay, fine, I'll do it, but what are the expectations? It's it seems like you had a picture in your head and then kind of learned more as you went.
Yeah, I think it was almost like having someone to hold me accountable / like a community. Because at that point, it was like, okay, cool, I'm talking to this like printf guy on the internet and this one like Xenodactyl guy, and then like I'll poke my heads into a couple streams, right, and like talk. I was mostly lurking in the back. And yeah, it was super nice. Like I joined the team, played in there. I think at that point it was like the most valuable Diamond Player Cup, and then started playing in the like most valuable Masters Cups. And then I was invited to do some co-casting for some of our like Alpha X like team leagues. I think that was actually the other big thing that I asked Xenodactyl about. I wanted to have like a regular commitment to like force me to practice. I think at that point I didn't have like the idea of like I'm gonna make it to GM or something like that. It was just like, oh, I want to get better at this game because I have fond memories and I really enjoy this game. And so the idea of like, okay, like obviously I'm not gonna go win IEM Katowice, but like I could play in these like semi-pro cups or like these like amateur cups. And so getting involved with like the Alpha Team League or like some of these other things was something that I wanted to do. It was great. I got a chance to start playing them, and then one thing led to another, and I was asked to like cast, one of the ones above that. They're like, okay, well you're playing in like the semi-pro, but we need someone to cast the pro. Like, do you think you'd be comfortable? So it's like, yeah, sure, I'm free tonight. Why not? And I think it's actually casting and watching StarCraft. I've learned a lot more. I used to know nothing about like TVZ or like TVT or like ZBZ, like any of the other matchups that didn't involve Protoss. I had like zero understanding of. But then I started like watching more of those games and like just really learning about it and getting involved with the community and hanging out with people.
Yeah, that's awesome. So were you not a hardcore watcher of the game prior to doing the casting then?
I watched a little bit, but like it was basically I would watch like GSL finals kind of thing. And it was interesting because I watched a lot of like, GSL finals and things like that. I went to MLG Anaheim back in 2012. But it was mostly focusing on like the finals, or if there was like a particular what's that, Florencio? If there was like a specific player, it's like, oh, I really want to watch like MC, or I really want to watch like Huck or like Trap. Like certain players I'd like watch their matches, but I wasn't super interested in watching Dark versus Rogue. Right? Yeah. It's like, okay, like this is stressful. A Baneling's gonna blow up and kill all the Zerglings, and my heart's gonna be pounding the whole time. I'm like, But then I started appreciating like some of the other matchups more, and kind of like devoting even more time like just StarCraft in general. And it's been fun to kind of get the return on that.
Yeah, very cool. I definitely get what you mean. So I've not cast anything near the level of kind of the stuff that you're doing, and certainly not with the frequency. I've had a few opportunities to cast like cool cool tournaments and stuff. But not with a ton of regularity. But either way, even the brief exposure that I've had to it
Mhm.
has kind of shown me that same thing as what you're talking about, where it's almost like there's a little bit more of a pressure that I'm holding myself to, where it's like, okay, if I need to talk about this TVT and sound smart, I sure as shit better understand it better than I do. Because, it's
Yeah.
one thing for me, like, I can still appreciate the beauty of it if I'm watching, TY versus Maru or something, and like,
Mhm.
Artosis is basically telling me what to think about the match. Like, and it's like he's correct, right? But I'm not having to really crunch on it and do that sort of mental work.
Yeah.
I still have the appreciation for it, but maybe not the understanding to as high of a degree as I would if it's like, okay, I have to generate that, right? Like, what do you
Yeah.
think about this position where, one player has air superiority, but the other person has this? It's like, gosh, I don't know. I'm not a Terran, like
Yeah.
it's interesting. Did you feel that kind of like, did you pick that up easily, or did you have to really like consciously focus on
I think first of all, I want to say that I don't think I'm an expert.
that?
I still, like,
Sure.
today, I was casting Alpha X Most Valuable Player, and
Hmm.
I was lucky to have Cuddlebear co-casting with me
Mm.
because we got into a TVT between Battlebee and Vindicta, and I was like, all right, like, why is one person opening with double gas versus the other person's opening single gas? And we got into this position where Vindicta had like a way bigger army, he had a much bigger economy, but Battlebee just had like air superiority. I'm like,
Mm.
that was it. It's like,
Yeah.
cool, you have 15 tanks and you've got some cyclones, but I have liberators with range. I've got
Mhm.
11 of them, and I've got a bunch of Vikings. And
Yeah.
like, you lose. Like, good day, sir.
Right.
And that's one of those things that I guess eventually it's like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. But until you like watch it play out,
Hmm.
like, it doesn't really stick. And so I think I remember being asked like, hey, like, do you want to do this show match between Nightmare and Maru? I'm like, okay, well, I better go watch some TVZs and like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
learn a
Yeah.
little bit. Yeah. In any case, like just watching these different players and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
uh, just figuring out how to do all that stuff.
Hmm.
It's definitely good.
Yeah. Very, very cool. So, um, I mean, gosh, we've talked about, your sort of like what felt to me like meteoric rise to GM as a cannon rusher. Your sort of
Yeah.
subsequent, dabbling in macro and trying to kind of level off these skills and maybe some future plans there. Talked about Alpha X and casting, and also just how you go really hard at anything that you kind of aim yourself at. And I'm really, really curious, because this is like one of the things that is the hardest for me. Like, how do you make it all fit in your life, right? Like, you've got your professional career, your relationship. Like, it just feels like, man, that's a lot of stuff to try to find hours in the day for.
Yeah, I think my ability to play has diminished greatly over the past couple of months
Uh-huh.
as I started my grad program.
Mm.
So I was lucky to have that period of, I'll call it, fun employment
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
between like February and like August, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that's when I made a lot of my progress.
Mm.
Like you mentioned, I started like playing and grinding, I think, back in like September 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think, yeah, if I looked at my chart, it was kind of like kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of it was just like having time to just like sit there and just play a lot of games. I think I played more games 2 seasons ago than I had played in all of the previous like 10 years.
Wow.
It was like, cool, I just cranked out like 4,000 games
Yeah.
this season or whatever. And it's like, I now have 8,000 games on my account. Great.
Yeah.
I think HJax pointed out recently that I now have more games on my account than he has on his account. Now, to be fair, Cannon Rush games are significantly shorter,
Right. Yeah.
so there's definitely a bias there.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but yeah, it was, I think, a lot of the ability to play and find that time was like, you know what, I have a couple months where I don't have responsibilities, and this is something that I want to focus on. I'm gonna drill into it, and I'm just gonna like go for it
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and see how far.
Yeah, totally. So I'm curious then, you kind of mentioned, and we've hit this kind of a couple times in our conversation, this idea of I'm interested in this thing, I'm going to work like crazy on it, and then
Mhm.
maybe I'm off to the next thing, right? And maybe that is, that stays within the bubble of StarCraft, right? In the case of like, really focusing on cannons and then moving to macro. But it also, you mentioned League earlier, like it can sort of be a different video game interest, or it could be something else entirely. Like,
Mhm.
I'm gonna go, was it hang gliding, paragliding,
Paragliding. Yep. Yep.
paragliding? Yeah. So, what do you kind of think, sort of your future goals or direction will be? Do you feel like you're gonna stick with StarCraft? Will it always kind of have a place in your heart? Like, what is there something on the periphery that's drawing your attention, kind of?
I think right now, I think StarCraft will always like hold a spot in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And like I mentioned, it's one of those like I remember playing this game as a kid. Very fond memories.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I think I will always play StarCraft.
Mm-hmm.
I if Frost Giant comes out with a new RTS,
Yep.
like fingers crossed, like I would love to like become addicted to that game.
Yeah.
Um, there was I think like a week ago, I played a bunch of Valheim with a bunch of friends, and we
Mm-hmm.
were like every night of like last week, I think
Mm-hmm.
we were like playing Valheim, like grinding, like hey, look at this like new thing that I just found. It's a I don't know how familiar you are with it, but it's
I
a
haven't played it yet, but I've been kind of following along as everybody's been kind of losing their minds over it.
yeah, yeah. So I did that for a little bit, and then it's kind of I petered out on that a little bit. Um, I'm still playing a little bit of League of Legends, a little bit of Teamfight Tactics. Actually, that's
Mm.
kind of my like. I'm just gonna chill out. I'm gonna watch some
Yep.
streams. I'm gonna like turn my brain off and just
Mm-hmm.
like play this slower paced game.
Sure.
Um, Still thinking, but definitely not stressful.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
but yeah, I don't know. I think right now my biggest focus is um, on school. Right,
Mm-hmm.
I have a whole bunch of stuff coming up. Actually, next week I'm doing my Ed TPA, which is like this thing that California forces people to do if you're going to
Mm.
become an educator, and they
Mm-hmm.
evaluate you to determine if you're fit to be a teacher. So there's a lot of focus on
Ah.
that.
Uh-huh.
Once I get through that, it'll probably be maybe I don't know if I'm going to drill my macro as hard as I did my can rushing, but like starting
Mm-hmm.
to try to just play a lot of games, just get games in on that.
Yeah.
Um, I think once I get up to like 4.7, 4.8, I'll probably switch back over to doing everything on my main,
Mm-hmm.
and then just see where
Yeah.
that takes me.
Very cool. You kind of feel like that's sort of close enough that you can kind of maybe you take some losses on the macro side, but no big deal.
Yeah. I feel like right now, my MMR swings between like 5.3 and like 5K.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Sometimes, I think a couple weeks ago I like dipped down to like 4.9 or something, and
Mm-hmm.
then like went back up to 5.1.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think if I already get my macro at a point where it's like equalized at like 4.8, so maybe between 4.9 and 4.7, um, that's close enough that sure I might lose some games on the
Mm-hmm.
back end, but uh, I will be playing the game kind of in the manner that I want, where it's like, hey,
Yeah.
like I'm gonna play this game like I'm already at the point where like people are like metagaming as I like go into games like
Right.
as FEqualsMA. So it's almost like the fun like tee hee hee hee. Okay, I've built
Right.
up this like this facade of oh you think I'm gonna cannon rush,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
then I get to play a macro game behind it.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's great, man. Yeah, we even, we had a memer in the chat say, isn't F equals MA the one
Yeah,
that does nothing but cannons?
the
See,
cannon
this
rush exactly.
is a
So that's
prospective
my
target in the
reputation.
chat.
We're
Oh
coming for
man.
you.
Yep. Very, very cool. Do you plan on sort of streaming that journey? Is that something you want to continue doing, or do you prefer playing more games off stream?
I think I'll probably start streaming that again. I think right now the reason I haven't been streaming as much is I'm in Zoom like all day, and then
Yeah.
like after that it's just kind of like I kind of want to just like play a little bit and like not be like performing
Mm-hmm.
almost.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that being a teacher is like a performer, but there definitely is some aspect of like I'm up in front of like you know 25 students right
Yep.
now, and like I'm talking and I have to like be engaging and like pay
Mm-hmm.
attention to chat and like monitor all these other things. um and there's actually a lot of really interesting parallels between streaming and like teaching right now, just with
Yeah.
how teaching online works.
Uh-huh.
uh and uh And so yeah, it's just one of those like, okay, I just want to focus on playing some games. I think as the year goes on, again, once I get through this like EdTPA thing, I'll probably start trying to stream like twice a week again. That's my goal.
Yeah.
And then yeah, I'll probably stream those games as well.
Very cool. Yeah, it's interesting you raised that. I was thinking that same thing as you were talking. Like, yeah, it almost has to be true that live streaming gave you an edge in the way that you're having to teach right now, right? Like, I think about so my mom's a teacher, for example, and I think about her having to learn that. And it's such a different thing for someone like you compared to her. You're already used to flicking your eyes down here to look at chat every now and then while you're trying to have your brain do something else important, you know?
Yeah.
That's,
yeah. There's definitely, yeah.
very,
Definitely something
very
there.
cool.
And
Go ahead.
it's actually been really interesting, like just like talking to other people who like don't have like that background and even just like streaming software, video conferencing software in general.
Yep.
Right. Just the ability of like, oh, I know how to change my scene, or I know how to like do these things. Like being able to manage all that is like the same as, okay, let me share my screen, and then now instead of I don't want to share my whole screen because I don't want to like dox myself or like show like the private chats that I'm having with like specific students and like things like that. So it's well, obviously I have never taught without having this like experience, so I can't really say, but it feels like, based on what I understand from other people, that there is some sort of edge there.
Yeah, there has to be. I mean, not just the technical stuff, but the performative aspect as well, right? Just the ability to be like, all right, I'm here and I'm on camera and y'all are looking at me and I need to hold your attention, but also my brain has to be doing other stuff. Like that's just a really difficult thing in general. I kind of even, I don't have to be kind of on and performative in nearly like the capacity that someone in like your profession would, but I've even had a little bit of that in COVID where like streamer stuff has started to pay off. Or even little things like this is a little bit off topic, but the other day I had to interview a new engineering candidate and I was doing it with a partner. And so I'm kind of like realizing that I was catching myself trying to figure out who was going to talk when, in the same way that I do when I do something like this or an episode of like Archives Book Club, where it's like, okay, there's 3 people talking. Look at their on-camera body language and figure out if they want to say something right now so that I can shut up, kind of thing. It's like such an interesting skill that like you'd never really need if it weren't for COVID. But I find myself armed with this skill now. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, they when someone starts to like lean forward in their chair, you're like, oh, kind of thing.
Yeah, or you see them breathe, or the opposite, right? Like so I often like when I'm just like deeply listening, I'm kind of like that, right? Like hand on my mouth, and I think it's a subconscious like I'm not going to talk. Right? Like I'm almost signaling it. And I catch myself doing it all the time without really thinking about it. It's to the point now where I've actually told Adderseth, if you see me doing that, it means I don't want to talk and you keep going. So we just kind of have that on the archives as like a signal.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's really cool. Gosh, man, I feel like I've taken you all over the map with this interview, just different stuff, and you've fielded all my questions. Is there anything else that you want to talk about, or anything I should have asked you that I missed? Am I messing up?
I don't know. I can't think of anything. I do want to like. It was like driving me crazy. I realized earlier I said like Nightmare versus someone else, and I was like, oh god, wait, that's a Protoss player. But that's just I'm putting that asterisk in here. I recognize Nightmare as a Protoss player. So when someone comes down and they're watching the video later and they leave a mean comment, we've got this snippet in there.
Dude, and I hope, and you're gonna take this the wrong way when I first say it, I hope someone does leave that mean comment, because what they're going to do is they're going to get to the point in the video where you misspoke and they're going to pause the video and write the mean comment.
100%.
I will 100% screenshot that person, post them in Discord so that we can all have a laugh, because they did not watch to the end. They did not have the benefit. He did type in chat immediately after he said it. Nightmare is a toss. I misspoke. I wasn't going to call it out, but because we know that some mean individual out there on the YouTube comments is going to say it, we're just... Here's the extras, the blooper reel at the end of the video. We're coming for you, guy in the comments.
Yeah. Other than that, no, it's I think this has been really great, and I would love to like talk and chat with you more. I also know I was watching. I think it was like Hearthstone and Up a Tree have been playing like the like a lot of co-op recently. And she was like, you know what, like I should play some co-op sometime. So if you ever want to play co-op. once your hand is
Sure. Yeah.
back to functional, I would very much enjoy kicking it.
Yeah, man. We should definitely do something. Whether it's that or whether it's, you trying to drag my sorry ass further up the ladder, whatever it is. I feel like you definitely have synthesized the advice and the superpowers a little bit better from
Mm.
HJax and Printf and the rest of those guys a little bit better than I've been able to. So maybe whatever that special thing is in your brain is the secret sauce that I need to get better. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see. I think everybody just has a slightly different approach, and
Mm, very
perhaps
true.
you and I are more aligned in how we need to practice.
Yeah, that could be. That definitely could be. Well, awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on. I will definitely get your socials on the YouTube version of this, but if you want to spam them in chat, you're more than welcome to do that, or say them out loud for the people. I can also help post those.
Yeah, I mean, twitch.tv/it's FEqualsMA, ITSFEQUALSMA. I have a Twitter. I think it's the same thing. It's FEqualsMA.
It is.
I
Yep.
don't I don't really social media very often. I should really get better at that, or at least have a thing that like tweets when I go live.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to try to get more involved in public facing. Right now, it's kind of like I've talked to you before. I'll hang. Oh, thanks for posting this in chat.
Yeah, of
Like,
course.
I've talked to you. Like, I'll talk to you in Discord, and like we'll hang out there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's another thing. If you're interested, you can go to my Twitch page and join my Discord from there.
Good stuff, man. Yeah. Well, thank you so much once again. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do. I might do a couple quick replay analyses, but yeah, thank you very much for taking a chunk out of your evening. Really appreciate the time. It was a fantastic conversation. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your night.
Yeah, you too. See you, man.